the United States produces almost 300 million tons of municipal solid waste, which is a nicer way of saying trash. That's about 5 pounds of trash per person per day. How is it possible to produce that much trash? It's insane. But more than that, what does the law have to say about that trash? Can it get you arrested? Can it make you rich? Can you sue the government if their trash injures you? Let's dig in on trash. Now, normally, when we toss out garbage, we forget about it. Out of sight, out of mind. We imagine that trucks pick it up and take it to some secret place hundreds of miles away from us, and we never have to worry about it again, right? But that's not true. We have a responsibility for that trash because that trash belongs to all of us. And I don't mean in some symbolic way where we all need to be better stewards of our planet, although that's true too. No, I mean that trash is literally public property. You don't believe me? Ask the Supreme Court, who decided in 1988 that trash becomes public property once it has been put out to the curb. Now, that may not seem like a big deal to you at first. I mean, you were throwing it away to begin with. Clearly, you didn't want it. So why does it matter that trash becomes public property at the curb? Well, because that's when the police can help themselves to it. You would be surprised to find out how many crimes are solved with the assistance of trash. For instance, there was a 38-year-old unsolved case of a newborn baby's death in South Dakota. But it was finally solved in 2019 when DNA evidence was found to connect someone to the death. And guess where that DNA came from? You guessed it. The cops went through someone's garbage. That gives a whole new meaning to the old adage, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Speaking of trash as treasure, you know who thinks trash is valuable? Hoarders. If you've never heard the word hoarder, then you probably don't watch much reality TV. Hoarding is when people become obsessed with saving enormous amounts of physical material because they have a strong emotional attachment to it and believe that they can't get rid of it. It's not just a weird habit or a quirk, it is a genuine psychological disorder. Most of the things that hoarders save would not be considered valuable to anyone except the person saving them, and even they couldn't tell you why they were so worthwhile to them. The truth is, everyone creates junk. The difference with hoarders is that they save a lot of it, while most of the rest of us tend to throw it away. We take it to the curb for the garbage men, or the cops, whoever shows up first. But what about the hoarders who save it all? Is that against the law? Are people allowed to just let as much trash as they want pile up in their homes for as long as they choose? At a certain point, it must become illegal, right? It must be some kind of criminal offense. But you might be surprised to hear that hoarding is a little more complicated than that. There are nearly no laws in the United States that say hoarding is actually illegal. That could be a tricky bit of law to write. After all, think about it this way. At what point does something technically become hoarding? Do you have to have a certain amount of stuff? Do you measure it by the pound or the ton? Maybe you would have to measure it by how much it blocks your clearance through your home. And what about the specific items that you keep? There are people who collect baseball cards and action figures and ugly little statues of big-eyed children. We call those people collectors. Should it be illegal just because someone keeps old newspapers or bags full of empty ballpoint pens instead of Beanie Babies? You can see how it could get legally dicey really fast. That's why most laws related to hoarding have to do with living environments being unfit or unsafe. Then, organizations like code enforcement can make decisions regarding what needs to be done to clean up the home. Now, some people think the government shouldn't have the power to tell you how much of anything you can have in your home. Why should law enforcement tell you what you can and cannot own? But the reason that code enforcement can tell hoarders to get rid of things is because that's not just a lifestyle choice. It can and often does affect people's health and wellness. And not just the owners of the hoarder material, but also others in the house and even nearby neighbors. Hoards can attract rats and bugs. They can cause people or animals to be injured by falling items. Old things can get rusty and dirty, creating a risk of infection and illness. That's why the basic rule is you can do what you want with your trash for the most part, but when someone's safety is threatened, someone has to put a stop to it. It's ironic that the government can tell people that they need to clean up their own trash, but no one can make the government do the same thing. Did you know that the US leaves trash all over the place and there's nothing anyone can do to stop them? Think about this. There is a place that the US leaves junk for years, sometimes decades. No one monitors it, and that junk literally has the potential to kill people. Guess where that junk is? If you said outer space, you're right. And it's not just the US. Many governments who have been to space left some kind of junk behind that's just out there, floating above our heads, ready to enter the atmosphere at any moment and come hurtling back towards us at hundreds of miles an hour. And that does actually happen pretty frequently. In May of 2021, a piece of Chinese rocket debris fell to Earth and crashed into the Indian Ocean. Now, most of the time, the junk is small enough that it burns up in the atmosphere and it never reaches the surface. But there's enough junk of various sizes out in space that some of it gets through and reaches Earth. Luckily, about 70% of the Earth's surface is water, so it has a good chance of just hitting the ocean. But what about when it does hit the ground? What is the law about paying for the damages that come from falling space debris? Believe it or not, the United Nations planned for it in their Outer Space Treaty way back in 1967. All the member countries agreed to certain rules regarding their behavior in space, and one of them was, states shall be liable for damage caused by their space objects. That sounds pretty straightforward, right? So if a chunk of the Russian space station lands in your backyard, you can just send the bill to the Russian government, right? No way, that's too easy. You'd have to tell the United States government what happened, then they would tell Russia, and then the US would reimburse you once Russia paid them. But don't hold your breath, because it probably won't ever happen. Stuff falls from the sky all the time, and almost no one pays for it. American space trash has landed in Australia, and we never bothered to pay for it. Russian space trash did damage to the Canadian wilderness, and Russia paid them barely half the cost of the damage. So that trash that most people think is worthless can actually cause incredibly expensive damage. But what if there was a legal way to make a ton of money from the leftover junk that people left laying around? Well, there is, and it can get you millions, but you're going to have to work for it. I'm talking about marine salvage. Almost 3/4 of the Earth is covered in water, and lots of boats have sunken, run into trouble, or disappeared in that water. And since most of the ocean isn't owned by any one country, that means there are a ton of very valuable ships out there just waiting to be found and salvaged. And once you're 12 miles out from the coast of the United States, you are in international waters. That's where the law of fines gives you the right to find a shipwreck, report it, and make a claim on it. You might be wondering if there are really that many shipwrecks out in the ocean? Well, the answer is yeah, there are a bunch. In the history of sailing, there have been somewhere near 3 million shipwrecks worldwide, and less than 1% of them have actually been found and explored. Think of how many ships full of gold and valuable metals and minerals are just laying on the bottom of the ocean waiting to be found. And it's super easy. All you need is several ships with advanced scanning equipment to search the ocean floor, and some submersible vehicles that can take you down there, and experienced divers who can explore for valuables, and lots of time to explore the nearly 3/4 of the ocean floor that humanity has still not mapped. So yeah, maybe shipwrecks aren't the easy get-rich-quick scheme that you'd hope for, but there are ways to make money off ships that haven't sunk to the bottom of the ocean. The law of salvage actually says that if you risk your own safety to rescue someone's ship or cargo while at sea, then you should be rewarded for that. And that applies to derelict vessels too. Derelict just means abandoned vessels. So if you find an abandoned boat, you can report it to the authorities. If no one claims it, it's all yours. But even if someone does claim it, you're supposed to be paid the value of the boat in order for the owner to get it back. It just goes to show you that when it comes to garbage, the law is not predictable. Sometimes garbage is worthless material that everyone owns, and the police are allowed to go through it with the intent of finding evidence against the person who threw it away. Other times, garbage is dangerous in large quantities in your home, and they will fine you if you don't clean it up. But that law doesn't apply to them and their space garbage. And finally, sunken ships and lost vessels can be claimed and can potentially make you rich. Who knew that the laws of garbage were this complicated and fascinating? To hear more wild but true facts about the law and how it affects you every day, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. That's it for this episode of No Way That's Legal. We'll see you next time.